Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for filing in on this slightly overcast Tuesday in Sydney today. My name is Jo, and I will be your host slash sharer of research slash therapeutic place to share your woes around social media today. I've had so much fun jumping into the research surrounding community and social media. And whoa, mama, it is a very deep and slightly dark at times world, but also some really fascinating and interesting information that we're going to unpack today. It's so great to see people jumping in already. We've got people from Melbourne. Someone jumped in from Shellharbour, which is beautiful. Thank you, Sue. Please let us know where you're jumping in from today. Avalon Beach, lucky Joe there. I would like to acknowledge that wherever you are on Aboriginal land, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am coming to you from the land of the Wallumattagal today. The Snapperfish people are on the edge of the Eora Nation to the east and the Darug Nation to the west of Sydney. And I am very lucky to be very close to the beautiful Lane Cove and Parramatta rivers. If you're not familiar with this part of the world, it has its perks. It has its downsides. But I'm very lucky to be in a part of the world where I have some trees outside my window, a beautiful dry roof over my head after some flooding earlier on the weekend. But yeah, it's great to have you with us today. If you're not familiar, you're joining a session with Good for the Hood. We are sustainability educators who work with councils particularly, but also government and non-government organisations around the country. We love building community. We love engaging people around sustainability topics, but topics around resilience, getting to know people in your community and living, simpler, safer and more connected lives in this sometimes very challenging modern world. We have been running since 2018. We've worked with people over Australia, and we're really thankful to be joining you today in your homes or your workplaces. So thanks for making us part of your lunchtime. We have been running a few sessions, particularly talking about the role of community and the changes we've seen post-COVID, but also just in modern digital times. So today is no different. We're going to look at some research, some tips, some ideas, but I'm going to ask something of you before we proceed, and that is if you can keep me going and keep me resilient and sustained by doing exactly what you've done, contributing as much as you can in the chat if you can safely, because it really helps me to feel part of the community for the session, and also makes me recognize whether I'm making sense. It's sometimes, as you can imagine, like speaking into a box of with no feedback on a webinar. So it'd be great to get your feedback as we go along. It is tricky in this environment too to also get anecdotes, which is really where this space lends itself. But if you have got some quick chats, quick stories, quick thoughts, I would love to hear them in the chat as well. It will certainly make the session much more valuable, not only for you, but for the other people on the session as well. I would love to know today whether you are coming in a professional capacity or whether you are here because you are just interested in this space. So if you are here because you have a government role and you work in this space, please let me know. If you're here because you are a community member and want to know about this stuff from the side of someone who maybe facilitates a group, or if you're here in another capacity, please let me know. It's nice to see we've got so many of our council partners on the call today. So thank you for being part of today. For those of you who are interested, we have a lot of our wonderful council partners here. So thank you for that. It's great to see some grassroots organisers, some wonderful people down on the Mornington Peninsula. Jackie, thanks for joining us. got Joe from Oatlands. Wow, what a beautiful, diverse group we already have here. So thanks for being part of it. We also have Anna on the chat today. I'm sure she's waving as as invisibly as she can, but she can help you with any links, and she'll just be keeping the conversation going as well. And as we talk about today, moderating anything that needs moderating. Of course, we won't need that today, but it's also great to talk about the role of having a wonderful moderator or someone help by who can jump in if we need to share particular links or information as well. As I mentioned, Good for the Hood is all about showing people the opportunities for positive change. We recognise that because of where we are and the way we live, we've got ourselves into some situations where we are fighting against the natural laws of the natural world. We're extracting materials which are not infinite. We are emitting CO2 and other greenhouse gases at a rate that is should be terrifying for anyone who's had a look at the science. We are producing waste in Australia, particularly at a rate which is completely unsustainable and is a damn shame, because we are wasting a lot of wonderful, precious resources. So we really recognise that Good for the Hood's role is bringing community along, is showing people positive ways of doing things slightly differently, and working with all levels of government and industry where required, and jumping in to facilitate programs that might get people to recognise there are better ways. We've been really lucky to work with 3 series of both the War on Waste and Fight for Planet A, our climate challenge on ABC TV. I'm one of the hosts of Planet Shapers on Channel 10 as well. So I'm very passionate of the role of storytelling, media, and positive solutions journalism in sharing better ways of living and doing things. And we also run an online community and education platform called At Home. So we have lots of skin in the game. We are really passionate about making sure that online and digital communities are positive places for people to be. But like you who are on the call, you probably recognize that things are a bit weird. I don't know if you feel this, but it's weird out there. And I've noticed a lot, particularly in the last couple of years, that the way conversations go online has changed. And I just thought, I have to understand whether this is just me being a bit sensitive about the world, or are we seeing different behaviors manifest and appear, which are completely new? So that's what I wanted to unpack today. And I'd be interested to know whether you are feeling the same thing. Is it just me, or are things weird? I always say weirdies. So that's one of the questions we're going to look today. So what have you noticed happening in online communities? I'm assuming you're all part of at least 1 or 2. Now, what does an online community look like? It can look like a whole manner of different things. So most of us would have had some experience with an online social media platform of one type or another. Online platforms have been around for a long time. I don't know if any of you had a MySpace account back in the day, or maybe you even had something even earlier than that. But my first social media account was a MySpace account that I started when I went on my overseas trip in 2004, I think it was, or 2005. And I remember posting a photo of me in Hyde Park and you know, thinking how wonderfully sophisticated I was. I think I had a very similar haircut to what I do now. But it is, MySpace was a community where you could, a bit like precursor to Facebook, but we've had LinkedIn now for 21 years, believe it or not. Some of us wish we still didn't have LinkedIn, but we have that community. LinkedIn now has its own little segments of communities in there where you can join interest groups of other professionals or industry groups. We know that Facebook has been around for a while. Most of us have at one point, if you don't currently have, you may have had a Facebook account at some point in the past. If you've ever delved into the murky world of Reddit, which is an anonymous platform, you might have joined particular communities where you can just comment and hypothesize about, you know, Kate Middleton, which went on a lot recently. You can comment about current law, things before the court cases. It's a really interesting place for kind of gossip, suggestions of what might or might not be happening, but also quite an interesting community of going on there. We have Meetup, which is groups of people who generally meet up, sometimes online, but more often than not in person. That's been around for a while. We've had WhatsApp communities beginning to pop up. I don't know if anyone's noticed that WhatsApp now has particular communities within sections, so you can actually I'm on one of the Parents for Climate groups, so you can have announcements, and then you can have subsections of groups in there where you can share different things. You can broadcast into that platform now as a community, so it can be a one-way broadcast of me to you about whatever the topic is that you want to hear about. Generally, it's a service or an information, or if it's like my local food co-op, what's in the grocery list that week. So they're online communities in theory. We know that Facebook groups have been around a little while now. We've seen Facebook groups evolve and change. They've gone through lots of incarnations, and some of them have kind of died. And then other Facebook groups have started, which are very interesting places for discussions. We've seen Facebook groups evolve where it's not just linked to the local soccer club, but there's a Facebook group that occasionally I get an alert about. I'm not on it, but for some reason the algorithm has decided I need to hear about it, which is just Photoshop edits. So can you Photoshop, a shark behind me while I'm swimming in the ocean? And so someone will post a photo, and the community will post in the comments underneath multiple Photoshop edits. People sometimes use it for serious things, but there's an awful lot of ridiculousness that happens in that community, for an example. Then you've got slightly more evolved communities like Discord, which much more gamification, a lot more appeals to a lot more of a younger audience. But I know Anna's been using Discord a lot lately, and we've been talking about that. It's really a place that enables some real-time interaction and really encourages you to engage and kind of almost urges you in, a bit like a Slack channel, but with a lot of additional features as well. And then we've seen platforms like Nextdoor. So we've seen Nextdoor is particularly used as almost a emergency alert system in the US, particularly. It's not been as big here, but it is certainly around, and I'm following some of the groups. So, you might hear about someone's got a bake sale on versus someone's cat's missing. There was a break-in down the road, hyper-local content around specific events and alerts, but also a place where you can promote your business, talk about events, those sorts of things. So they're the sorts of online social media communities we've seen. We know that there's a lot more social media platforms than that, but I wanted to highlight those in particular because of the features they have, and know that obviously online communities are not just the platform itself, it's also the features. So things like stories, messaging, you can have audio spaces in some of these places. Sometimes they pop up challenges or badges or alerts or games. You can have polls and surveys and particular services which enable community to exist. I've got some great comments there. So great to see that I've been getting a lot back into in-person events. Great to hear, Angela. Yeah, it's bizarre. I was talking to some people last week from a council, and they were saying actually it wasn't a council, it was a community group, and they were saying it's taken a while for their groups to really get back into regular in-person events, not as an organization, but cross organizations. And they've noticed that that's taken quite a lot longer. So I don't think you're in line. I love your point there, Angela, about people saying things online that they wouldn't say to people's faces. I was definitely had that on my list of things to check and verify. So I'll be talking about that. We're losing the ability to listen, hear different ideas and engage. Yeah, I definitely thought that was a common experience as well. And yeah, we're definitely seeing some shifts. I wanted to also highlight that there is an emerging community management software out there. Now, this is an insane number. I just did a little search for ones that I was familiar with. We use Mighty Networks ourselves. There is a mixture of course content that can be delivered through those platforms, but also spaces where you know, as I said, with discourse, where there's actually community can be embedded and conversations can happen. Now, that's not an exhaustive list at all. There's so many others as well. But there is this absolute explosion of cultural and community software that is enabling people to go into particular subgroups or organizational groups and engage online. That obviously the mission for doing that can be very diverse and different. It could be to learn, it can be a learning community, it could be a collaborative community, it could be an activist community where you're trying to campaign and develop something. It could be networking and support and you know, a community to build capacity and connections and enable people to lean on each other and reach out for support. There's lots of reasons why we use these. There's also an awful lot of platforms which we don't use in Australia, or certainly English speakers only do not use. And it's worth acknowledging that platforms like Weibo and WeChat, I think that Viber is a platform that's used by a lot of communities. There's a Japanese social networking site called Mixi. There's a German social networking site called Zing, and I think it's Zing or Crossing, XING. I should have checked what that was. Tuenti is a Spanish platform. So obviously with called and different language-based communities, that itself has created, it's not even that the platform was necessarily designed for them, but that's the platform that has developed in the same way that Australian communities are using different platforms in different spaces. But wherever your community is, there's no doubt hundreds of different types of platforms, which in itself is exhausting. If I'm honest, I find the number of apps of which I can now be reached on makes me very tense. And I think maybe that's part of this challenge with building community, is that we're being pulled in a whole bunch of different directions at any one time, and it's incredibly overwhelming. That's if we can navigate and know how to use them. It got me thinking about what makes an online community. You know, why is an online community, you know, is it a platform? Is it something more? And so I guess I'm interested to know whether you think what these are correct. But, you know, in my opinion, an online platform or online community needs to have a platform that is built for purpose and a purpose for existing. Even if it's just for fun and silliness, what's the purpose this group exists? And if you don't have a clear purpose, even if that purpose is just to bring people together for a certain geographical location or a street or an associated interest, what's the purpose for getting them together and being there? What do you want them to do in that space? And did they come because they wanted to be part of it, or were they invited in and encouraged to be part of it, or were they told they had to use it for a specific program? What's the purpose and what's the level of engagement? A good online community needs moderation. If anyone is a community moderator on any Facebook page or group, it can be, depending on how active that community is, it can be exhausting. Now, I somehow, in my infinite wisdom, about 20 years ago, decided to start a Facebook group for my high school, which I left many years ago. But at the time, I thought it would be a great way to keep in contact with the people that I left school with. And we all moved away, and very few of us actually see each other because from interstate. And then to this day, this group runs, and I have been through so many evolutions of the moderation of that group, to the point that I've seen the trends change. I'm getting a lot of people who were, I guess, what I would describe as bots joining at different times. I've had periods of time where there was an awful lot of spam that came through. There's been times where there's been a lot of explicit content posted terribly on the platform that I've had to moderate and remove. There's gone through times where I opened the group up because I couldn't stand the ridiculousness of moderating this group that I didn't even really want to be part of anymore, through to times where I've been really tough on it because I've been really worried about the fact that horrible content's being posted there. And that's before I've even got to think about the engagement between people and whether it's civil and decent. So if you've got an active group, moderation is exhausting. And if you don't have people to share that with, more often than not, you're not going to do a very good job, or you're going to burn yourself out. So moderation is really important, and it's kind of critical for a good experience, because no one wants to be part of a group that's getting, abused, or where there's material that you don't want to see, or if it's gone way off track from what the group's meant to be, or there's spamming, or soliciting of material, or people trying to participate in hate or political speech, which is irrelevant. So moderation is very important, and in fact, legally, we have a lot of obligations to make sure it's done well. There's also a lot of things that come with community groups, and that is an identified, norm of how you participate. And that Photoshop group that I, see every now and then, there is a very systematic process of which people participate in. And I've seen it happen all across the board with groups, whether they're local or online local. There is generally a sort of a normative way of interacting, which again has evolved over time. But we see this way that people start to recognize, oh, that is how I communicate, even towards the way they can call each other and what other people participate in that group. What's the name of the people who are in that group? I'm part of Inner West Mums in Sydney, so they will call themselves IWMs. Also part of Ride District Mums, they will say, hi, RDMs, Ride District Mums. It becomes this whole way of, I talk to you in this way. I've seen it happen in lots of different groups. People start to form an identity in the way they interact on that platform, because that's now the assumed norm for that group. Fascinating, weird, but fascinating space to watch. So I'm interested to know if there are lots of communities which you're part of. Yes, I love that comment, Angela. A lot of volume of the online communities takes definite intention to make it work and keep it going. Absolutely. And to have a culture which you actually want to be a part of, I can tell you. And that can go both ways. If it's too intense, or if it's just a one-way conversation, you can start to go, oh, I'm not getting anything back. So there's certainly a two-way street there. One of the groups that I've been part of or watched for a long time is the war and waste groups around Australia. So one of the roles I had in the early days of the second series of war and waste was as an impact producer or impact coordinator for the show. And we reached out to all the groups who had popped up as a part of this war and waste phenomenon. And there was hundreds around the country. And we were seeing, people sharing. And there's this very large war and waste group that I've watched for a long time, very prolific still, posting and sharing. But at different times, people sort of go, I don't want to be part of certain groups anymore, because maybe the tone or the intention has changed, or they find that it's too negative, or it's too irrelevant. So there's lots of work that goes into a group evolving. And one of the things that is important is that communities should evolve. If they stay the same in a certain way, it's probably not going to work, or it may not be as relevant to the people in the end. So yeah, yes, I love so much spam, Angela. And locality-based online communities scare you. Yes, there's so many arguments. I love that there's always a group, and then there's always a group that says, Northern District sales, no rules. There's always a group where people are like, I didn't like the rules on the other group, but I want to do the same thing my way. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? So I want to know, I'm going to have a couple, no drama. Yes, the no drama groups. Yeah, we buy, swap, sell, no drama. I love it. It's so passive aggressive. Fascinating, isn't it? That we decide that we're now going to do it better and differently, and we're going to resolve the issues. We had a very interesting experience in my community where there was a breakaway mums group. which ended up calling themselves the cool mums, which I thought was an assumption in itself, because I definitely didn't feel like a cool mum, still don't. But yeah, it was, we're all those guys, and we're the cool mums, and and it was very interesting online to watch for ages. I was like, this is fascinating. I want to join Cool Mums just so I can see the drama. Very high school. Excellent. So interested to know what social media has done to you on a personal level. So I'm going to tell you straight up that I have more screen time than I should. I tell myself it's because I need it for work, when I know for a large part of the stuff that I'm looking at online is not work related or needed. So what have you noticed about yourself when it's come to social media? If you're on it, if you're using it, I mean, obviously digital spaces, and you can look at all sorts of things on your phone. It doesn't have to be social media, but what have you noticed about yourself? Perhaps if you reflect on the last 5-10 years, what's different for you? Anna said she has a shorter attention span. Hard to get off. Excellent. That's a beautiful insight, Angela, and we're going to talk about why that is. I've noticed that I seek it out because I feel like I'm missing something if I don't. I feel like I have to go and know what's happening, even if it can just a few, okay, right, good, nothing's happening. Like, there's definitely a sense of FOMO that comes with social media. And I think it's also very habitual for me now. I think I pick it up, and I would really struggle to put my phone away for a long period of time if it was away. Yeah, don't like certain ones. Easy to go online for a specific purpose and get, yes, like, and my son has ADHD, and I often think, you poor guy, online social media is going to be a nightmare for you to stay, because it's harder for anyone to stay on track when we are bombarded with the amount of things that we're, could possibly look at. It's part of your routine. Yeah, excellent. And it's weird if you don't do it. Yes, yes. Excellent insights. And you are not alone. I found it really interesting to read some info from this Tristan Harris. He said that he's moved away from technology being a tool, like social media. Technology used to be a tool that we would use. We would have a need, and then we would go and get the tool for that need, and then we would do the job we needed to do with that tool. That's not what social media is now. It has become something that is using us as a tool in a way. It isn't something that's just sitting there passively waiting. It has its own intentions and goals, and its way of which we engage with it is basically based on the psychology, using our own psychology to get us back into use it, which I know this is a really bleak way of looking at it, but I think it's reasonable to understand that the reason why we crave it, why we want to go back in, why we are seeking it out, why we feel we can't get off it, why we get sidetracked, why we're bombarded with stuff, is using all of the aspects of the way our brain works, of the way we receive information, of the way we get dopamine and satisfaction, and and gamifying the experience so much that we feel better when we use it. And it's become definitely part of how we interact. I love Angela's mortified by the memories that pop up. Yeah, I used to do that weird thing where I think Facebook used to say, Joe Taranto is, and then I would just write. So I would say, my post would be standing on a bridge in London, and that would be my post. Like, instead of, hey, I'm in London and I'm on this, and there's a photo, it would just, and it wouldn't no photos. I'd never post a photo. It would just be standing on a bridge in London. I'm like, oh, well done. Okay. Very different interaction now. How accurate the algorithms become. I'd be interested to see, Anna, what you mean by that in terms of what's being pushed to you, I'm assuming. You've become more private. You rarely post. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that we are definitely worried about what people are seeing. I often think weirdly, when you're on a group chat and you see some interaction, the first thing you do is go on, who is this person? And then you look at their profile picture, and obviously there's a lot of locked profiles and things on social media, but we want to know who that person is. Why would they say that? What do they mean by that? You know, what kind of person would make a comment like that? And I, you know, there's a big reason that I don't participate in those conversations, but also that I want my profile to be private because I don't want people doing that to me. So we flagged it before, but do people behave differently online than they would in person? And now, first of all, before we think about people, think about yourself. What is it that you feel compelled to, even if you don't do online, that you wouldn't do in person or in pleasant company? I think the main one for me is that I would not get into a deep discussion of intense issues with complete strangers before I'd even had a chance to know them. Generally, when you meet someone, you would have an interaction, a context, an understanding. You don't just walk up to someone and said, I notice you've made a comment about nuclear energy. I'm going to go you on it. Like it's a very aggressive interaction when you just, or you don't even, it's like just seeing someone in the dark and saying, right, you have that opinion. All right, let me talk to you about it. So that's one thing I notice about, I'm much more willing to engage on a topic that I maybe disagree with, or I have reasonable enough evidence to talk about and go, actually, that's not true. I would never do that with a complete stranger in experience, especially without an invitation. And I guess we see interactions like that as invitations. There's not a lot, there's no nuance. There's a lot of talking at people, and that's obviously the feeling. So this is what the research has shown, and this is sort of there might be other great studies, but this one I liked because Sula talked about the online disinhibition effect, which is the fact that we are just really, really disinhibited online. It's like we've had 4 drinks before we even get on, and we're just willing to say and do things online, perhaps mostly say, because that's the chat, isn't it? We are very happy to engage in a way that we just really wouldn't unless perhaps we had a few drinks, or we were, do in a different space. It's very weird for us to go into these interactions. And so these are the reasons why Sula has said that this is a phenomenon. This is the theme space that have come up from the research. And this is obviously a little bit older now, but I don't think it's really changed very much. The first is that online gives us a sense of anonymity. So, we are able to participate, at least if it's under our own identity, even behind a sense of, you can't see my profile because it's locked, or, I've got a photo, but it's only, a little bit of my face, and you can't probably tell where I'm from, and you've never met me. So I'm okay to be here and this person in this, and the lack of physical presence leads from kind of a detachment from the consequences. And we know that we can also just put it over there when we want to walk away from it. So anonymity is a big part of it. I definitely see a lot of profiles that don't look like profiles as well, that don't look like real people. And I think sometimes they probably are, but they're using that guise of just a cartoon photo and a weird picture of a car in their profile, in their banner photo. And that gives you a sense that, oh, well, okay, I can just say whatever I want, bye-bye. The other part that he mentioned was that asynchronicity, or a lack of time, synchronized time, can really make us have weird interactions. So there's a delay. So we either can be simultaneously typing and it's bang, bang, and then we get out of sync, or we can have periods of time where you comment and then you put your phone down and then you go away and then you come back 10 minutes later and then you send 3 messages and then you can put it away. And it can also lead to a fair amount of misunderstanding, and there's no way of rectifying or clarifying what was said or how that was said. Now, this is a weird one, solipsistic introjection, which basically means that we project what we think the person wants us to experience or understand from our own experiences before. So that can lead us to think, well, one other time I was on this platform and I was abused by this guy who mansplained, solar energy to me. And I'm going to go this guy, when actually they're like, well, I didn't mean that at all, but now she's had a go at me. And so we bring all of our baggage, and we're projecting a lot of experiences into that, which can mean that good luck to the person that we're interacting with. We really don't have a full sense of what maybe their intention was. And again, it's through the third party as well. So or not third party, it's through an online platform. We can't see or clarify perspectives as well. Also, we have a lot of detachment from real life. So that can really lead to a fair amount of bravado. Wouldn't say half the stuff, and I wonder if the people online would. And the other thing is that we can kind of there's no one really policing immediately as well. We can report things but we can say some pretty whack stuff without, maybe someone saying, well, hang on, like there's no security guard about to kick you out. There's no, police officer going to tap you on the shoulder when you start shouting at the person. And there's no one else witnessing it. And even if they're sitting in the room with you, they can't see that, so we know that leads to all sorts of issues with younger people and bullying. And then there's the lack of pause. I love that. And zero filter, and a phenomenon where people go into a rant at something that happened instead of yes. I think often it's interesting, Angela, where people feel like that they go off track, and you can see they're like, there's the topic, there's the comment, oh, they're going to talk about something completely different. And it's amazing how quickly it can really decline. And I'll show you an example that I had. It was quite a while ago now, but I still find it fascinating, because this was a community where I felt everyone was on the same page. And I found it still quickly spiraled into something pretty shitty. Welcome back. No worries. Also just, everyone's doing that. I was just going to say, if everyone's worried they're not getting responses online, but they are, good on you. Just if you make sure you're messaging to everyone. So someone said it before, those phenomenons can actually mean that we have some more positive interactions too. They're not all negative. And that was what came out, is actually it can enable us to be more creative than we normally would. We can create ridiculous photos and post them online where we never would do that, maybe in person with someone. It can mean that we're safe to self-disclose things about us. There's a reason why online communities are very powerful to share things that are traumatic or upsetting or, grief. Most beautiful communities that I've been part of have been at points in my life where I've needed people who have been going through the same thing as me, even though the idea of maybe meeting up with that person in person would have been horrendous. I wouldn't want to, but I needed that person online at that time. Anyone going through fertility treatment or the loss of a loved one or miscarriage or, those lived experiences for someone as a group, or cancer treatment or a chronic health issue. They're really powerful experiences that without, because of the online experience, sometimes that inhibition is good, because we wouldn't come forward otherwise. We would tuck it away. And I'm sure there are large groups of people of which online communities are powerful entirely because of those reasons. So the research was saying, look, it's not all bad, but we do need to recognize that these phenomenons are making us do things we would never do in person. So is it causing the collapse of civil interactions? Do you think that we're actually in a situation where, people can't even just talk to each other? Like, it's just foul. And I'm only giving you a yes or no here. I couldn't give you sometimes no, because I just didn't want anyone to sit on a fence. So give me an idea. Do you think it's fundamentally changed civil disagreements or interactions online? All right, getting there. Oh, a couple of late no's. All right, so most people said yes, they feel like it's probably causing a fair amount. And I know I've deliberately not given you anywhere to go with that. No nuance. It is on social media after all. Yes, people seem to say more outlandish thing. Yeah, sorry, Abby, no fence option. It really does depend on the group too. You're right. I know there are groups which will safely have civil interactions, and there are other groups where you're like, oh, well, let's see how this goes. This is going to end terribly. And I don't know if you guys feel this, but I have a sense where when a post is going to go foul, like you can see it, you're like, oh, and I often can predict it because of the way the post has been worded. It's like, why can't people learn how to park their cars when they go to the shops, and they share a photo of the car, and you're like, oh, this is not gonna. And there's a reason why people will jump on the top, a post that's written in a way that's either, I guess, attack someone or is inflammatory. It's quite you can sense when that will happen. So yes, I 100% agree that it will really depend on where you are, but I definitely think we have reached a point where there has been a complete shift in how we interact in some scenarios. And the good thing to note, I guess, is that it doesn't mean that's the way. It doesn't flow across in every scenario. It is worth acknowledging that we do have a bit of a problem, and this is not really a social media problem, but we do tend to surround ourselves with people with similar views to ourselves. So for every one contrasting opinion friend, we've generally got 4 Facebook friends who are on board with us on that topic. And if you think about your own social media experience and the sort of people you probably interact with, and to be honest, the sort of friends you probably hang around with and run through a bunch of issues, you think, well, yeah, we'd probably, for the most part, be on the same page on a lot of things. But if people that, every now and then you'll go, oh, didn't realize that. And it'll come out, maybe during an election or during a referendum or during, a big world event. So I wondered if maybe we have just got into a situation where we're sitting in these weird echo chambers online where we just have this horrible sense that we all just go deeper and deeper into the space, and we become more polarized, and how much of that is just a sense and how much of that is true. So there's absolutely a sense that if we are doing that, if we are self-segregating and only interacting with people who share and depends on how extreme those views are as well, we can find ourselves exposed to things like confirmation bias, where you believe that, the more people you meet who have the same belief as you, that, oh, yes, I knew it. They all believe it. Everyone believes that, that you stop being exposed to more diverse opinions, and you start having less empathy for people who do have diverse opinions or different experiences to you. Do you then become more polarized politically? And a lot of people would, see that there is maybe more of a polarization, particularly in America or in certain countries where, we've lost maybe a middle ground in that space. So I was wondering, is that the case? So one of the things that I do notice a lot is that, particularly around posts and topics, is that there's this sense that, and we all do it, and the more time you spend online and the more you rely on it for work or even, your if you're in social media you post things and you're looking for engagement. And the sort of engagement we want, I'm having internet issues, hopefully you're still with me, is that you want likes. You want people to go, yes, I agree. But there's a thing called getting ratioed. And I don't know if you've seen that on X or Twitter or, Facebook, where that if you post an opinion and more people comment, maybe contrary to your belief, as opposed to like your post, that's a ratio. You've been ratioed. People are disagreeing with you more than they are in support of you. And that's suddenly considered a really negative thing. So I'm hearing that a lot. Now, it could be that I'm a bit too close to family members who are involved in, civic life, and that they're worried about, oh, people, don't like what I'm saying, but it's also, we have got this sense where we want people to agree with us. We want people to be on board with what I say. And I hear a lot of people, particularly younger people, not wanting to express something because they don't want to be wrong, particularly around sustainability, climate change, renewable energy, electrification. So we've got this point where we're really wanting to post and people to validate us, not disagree with us. Getting ratioed is a really bad thing. And this space in the middle for productive comments and agreement and consensus, if needed, if it's even needed, is considered the ideal. But there's a lot of sense that we just want people to love us and like the post and say, isn't that great? And not disagree with us or, call us out or have a go at us. So there is a concept called an echo chamber. And I did look at particularly around the political side of things, if social media is causing echo chambers and filter bubbles. And a filter bubble is that you only get served up the information that you agree with, basically. So you never see anything outside your bubble. And we would all probably think that it's quite perverse because, the algorithm's only going to give us what we want. There is a sense that is the case, but also what I've been reading is that filter bubbles particularly are not as widespread as we probably think, particularly because if we are searching for topics or news articles and things, we're probably going to be served up actually more diverse news articles than what we would normally read. So Anna and I have on our community platform an RSS feed, so we actually serve news articles up over certain topics, and I therefore read more widely in that space than I would around those topics than if I was just self-selecting the news stories myself. So there is a sense that if you're going to search for a topic, you actually won't necessarily get a very narrow space. But if you're only selecting the news that you want to hear or the information you want to hear and you're filtering out everything else, then yes, you can end up into a situation where you only hear what you want to hear. Now, we know that there is definitely psychological phenomena where you only read things you agree with. We know that if you scan a letter to the editor and you get 3 or 4 lines in, you know that's going to be a climate change denial, or if it's going to be particularly, contentious in a way that you don't align with, you'll stop reading and you'll go and find something else that does align more. There is definitely a sense that that's just the way that, unfortunately, we are designed to function. But it wasn't straightforward that social media is polarizing and putting us in echo chambers and bubbles. So I guess just be careful if we're saying social media bad, puts us in. It has the potential, absolutely, but the literature review and the data was saying, look, it's a little more nuanced than that, and particularly because we're spreading ourselves off across lots of different platforms which work in different ways. It may not be as horrendous in every platform. If we only had one platform that we only used, then that can be problematic. Obviously, you could argue that Meta has a pretty good dominance of the cross-section of social media. Excellent. Anna's deep in this. Anna's the go-to. She probably should be presenting this topic. So what are the online communities you're participating in? I'd love to know. Throw them down. I've mentioned a few mothers, online mothers forums. I really enjoy my energy efficient electric home, which is an online community, the War and Waste communities. I'm part of a number, as I mentioned, Parents for Climate local group. I'm a member of a lot of clubs and groups, including my local, football clubs and things that for my kids. They are all online communities that I'm part of. So what it is about local communities and the problem that we're seeing, and this has been really well articulated, and how we probably came up with today's session from this article from the Stanford Social Innovation Review that said local social networks are filled with actually sometimes more racist and toxic information and misinformation than more broad platforms. And actually the impact of these groups are more damaging. I know, who knew? And the reason is because local issues, when they're met with digital disinhibition and passion, make it really charged. And they said it's sort of like the old days where, it's like a P&C meeting online. People are really passionate about these issues. They really want the best for, they get really upset about parking in a particular place or what's being served at the canteen. Once you match that with digital disinhibition, people are really, really likely to become even more agitated and aggressive. And so it's worth understanding that the reason we've got there, even though it's not always worse, is because we've lost a lot of the opportunities that we maybe had to do that. So one of the things we know that's happening is that civic associations, organizations, and local papers, the old paper that we, maybe they're online, but the old paper we used to get our information from, or the newsletters, and our organization, our government organizations have become, in some places increasingly stretched. So social networks, local social networks in particular, have gone on to fill those gaps. So my local paper, the joyously designed Weekly Times, the TWT as we call it, is the only local paper we have left in my community. But most people don't receive it to their home. Most people don't read it. It's very small, and it's nothing like when we had 2 local papers and they were both delivered to the home. That would have been a reliable way to get all your local information. That's not the case anymore. We don't get event listings that way. You don't get neighborhood news. I don't get letters to the editor in any other way. You don't get the school updates in the same way. So they're all received from local online platforms. So one of the questions that this Local Paradox article raised was, is this just really a response to like an institutional loss of our local media? And I would say in some respects, it makes a lot of sense, because the sorts of things we go online on those local groups to look for is a recommendation for a plumber, finding out what pays like down the road, to ask someone what a local school's like, to find out who to go to if you've got, a particular issue or question. They're all questions that we maybe would have got from other places before. And so when you team that up with digital disinhibition and people are like a bit on edge, you can become in a really interesting place. One of the other things we see a lot is this sense of the good old days. And people saying, well, used to be better. We know what it used to be like. That street, oh, used to be beautiful. Look at it now. Oh, look at all the, there's no trees in our community anymore. What's happened to the heritage? There's too many apartments. No one knows how to drive anymore. You start to hear these, schools are terrible. And I hear this online, in particular local groups, a lot. And Anna and I have talked about it a lot. And we went and we found this article. It was written by John Lawrence, who's from the UK. This was in The Guardian. It's worth a read. Was it actually better? And there is some phenomenon around nostalgia. We know that we're likely to remember the past differently to how it actually was. And that sense of ideal community teamed up with this angst around the current community can fuel that feeling. So I think it's worthwhile acknowledging that, it's different, but was it always better? And there's a lot to say that in a lot of ways, life wasn't always better. And when I've looked at the satellite pictures of what my community looked like, and I know there's been tree loss, but there were significant times in history where there were no trees in this area because of the development. So we're sitting in this pitch, so there's a whole bunch of nuance that we need to understand about our local spaces. The other thing to recognize is that young people are really good at digital activism and citizenship. It just looks really different. So when people are going, oh, they're not as involved as they were, they don't go to meetings, they don't volunteer, actually they do, but it's very different. So we need to be really careful about adding that to the lens. And as we get older, I'm sure it's going to happen to us. We will reflect on I used to have a page and it was the best thing ever. People used to be nice to each other. Put our rose-colored glasses on, and then we'll think, well, so I think it's worth acknowledging, though, that community management is the secret sauce for keeping groups going. And we just said it before, if you don't have a good culture of a page or a good reason to be there, then it can all go to crap pretty quickly. And there are certain groups that you just know are hotbeds for this. There are certain other groups that have a really lovely, helpful space where you can genuinely go and ask questions without fear of being attacked. But there's a group that went wrong that I saw. The first one is with climate group. So people who are all very aligned in mission and purpose. How do you deal with the climate scaremongers? Not the deniers, I've got that down. But the ones that were overzealous, the world is ending in 15 minutes, I'm finding it incredibly difficult to reason with. So here's two different responses, and I followed the chain. The first one said, I'd probably start with compassion. It's really overwhelming and anxiety provoking. At the beginning, it feels lonely. And then the original poster said, thank you. I didn't consider that. Thanks heaps. That's that person's interaction. While that was going on, this other thread was running, and it was like, I've never met a climate change scaremonger. I suspect you're a troll needing the attention of an admin. And then that person wrote back, pull your head in. Not an uncommon experience online, but I went, wow. So I looked at that from a community management perspective, and I thought, what would you do with that? Because to be honest, that first response was beautiful and that interaction was really positive. And so would you delete the other comment and caution them for actually breach of rules? What does that look like? What are the rules that they've breached? And how do you make sure that people aren't too scared to post? So good community admin would get involved, in my opinion, at this point and say, look, genuinely, this was a genuine question, and I'd like to just you to watch, the name calling, respectful conversation, whatever. So good community online management is a crucial component of local online communities. So I'd love to know which ones you love. The ones that you go, these are my favorite. I love going to them. They're so positive. They know all the answers. I know I'm going to get a good answer, a response there. It's not to say there aren't times where it's horrible, but for the most part, you know that you can engage in a respectful way and have a think about what do they have in common. Generally, they will have pretty active moderation. They might even have post controls. So I genuinely think if you've got regular postings, then you should have post approvals on. I'm not going to post things that I know are going to get inflammatory before I've had a chance to check them, or I'm going to have keywords activated, or I'm going to mean that certain people who I've warned already are going to have to for me to approve their posts. There are many, many, many settings that community managers can use. I'm also going to make sure that there are ways to give feedback and that there's clear guidelines about how to interact. Basically, from that local paradox piece, they said a good local network is values-driven, closely moderated, trusted, and at the end of the day, still local. We do need local groups because they're the only places we can get some of this information. And we do need local groups for resilience and climate response and, for working together to bring people along on the journey. So it should be that we have really good management of those if we're going to want our groups to work. So what have you seen? When have you seen a great community manager? I know that, Inner West Mums balances those. Yeah, I think you're right. I'd love to know any other community groups that you think. So I've concluded a couple of, I know not all of you are in New South Wales, but I did think this was a nice place to start. The New South Wales government has some, I've lost an earring. I thought that might happen. This is my asymmetric look now. Social media guidelines for community management, really interesting place to start. If you're from an organisation, a council, and you're wanting to look at this and you haven't already done it, it's really worthwhile. You also need to be aware, if you have a community group, what are the defamation, cyberbullying, hate speech, privacy and discrimination laws, and how are you implicated? If you have a group where this is going on and you're letting it happen, what's the implication for you? You also really should have, a list of processes where you can sort of say, right, when this happens, we do this. I don't let that get away. Or if you're worried, pull it back so that you can have some control, because it's really important that you do moderate, that you don't exploit anyone's privacy, that you do prevent defamation, hate speech, bullying, threats of violence. It's under the criminal code, that you can't do these things and say these things. So you want to make sure that you're stopping that stuff happening. I wanted to list this resource. If you are a community manager or you're really interested in it, the Swarm Conference is one of the Australian Community Managers events each year. And also Australian Community Managers are a group that gives support to people who do moderate and run groups, more in a professional capacity, because let's face it, a lot of brands have social media as part of what they do now. But it's definitely worth staying across what they do. I would also encourage that you have to be the change we want to be in the world. I have stopped engaging in, I guess, disagreements online, unless I can sort of post something where I can direct someone to a comment. I really, and if I'm ever baited back, I'd immediately stop. I know that sounds really simple. It's partly for my own sanity, but I can't do it, and I don't want to do it anymore because I don't think it's positive. So I would encourage you to try and lead with a greater level of maybe, you know, a better level of behavior than the average. Maybe we can try and lead from there. It's also important to recognize what will fire up our community, and they are generally controversial or polarizing opinions. Often photos will get people inspired, so you can still get people happening and responding, but you don't have to necessarily be, you know, getting people to, and if it's a good community, you won't necessarily have to get that engagement happening. But I do love those groups that you're part of, which are like a behind the scenes of a program or a project where you're sort of getting exclusive content as well. There's some of my favorite, linked to like podcasts and that sort of stuff. But again, having a consistent, you know, an authentic brand voice as well is important if you are from an organization as a community manager. So we recommend that if you are using online communities to build your capacity, your resilience, identifying community champions, trying to get a campaign happening, that you do try to couple that with the online. Hello, can you see me again? Sorry, just completely jumped off, but that's okay. My last comment was, if you are from a council, we'd love to hear from you. Anna can post in our email there. We do have a community group. The final thing I really wanted to do was share with you our next event, which won't be till June, but we do have a State of Our Hoods event coming up, which Anna can share with you on our final, which is from Humanitics. Anna, if you got it there, hopefully you can find that without too much trouble. But I wanted to just quickly, I feel like I've lost my beautiful chat to go in there. But great to see. I run a group for council, a green living group, worked hard to establish a positive, encouraging space. The main thing that's helped me is having a paid person. Beautiful. Yeah. A couple that bring out the worst. Great. Thanks. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for dropping out. I feel like it was, I've obviously said something that's angered the social media gods. If anyone's got any questions or thoughts or anything else they'd like to follow up with, please let us know. I know I'm right on the end of our time together. It was really fascinating to go through the information that we had. And if you've got some further insights you'd like to share or anything you'd like to follow up with us, please let us know. But we hope you can be part of our future sessions. There's our next webinar. And if you're interested as a council in our at-home program, we would love to hear from you, where we can help manage some of the online community building as well. My name's Jo Taranto. It's been my pleasure to be with you. Thank you for being part of my Tuesday and for letting me be part of yours. We will see you at our next event. Stay safe and look after each other.